welcome. On this lovely warm day in Brussels. I welcome you to Mission in Progress, the Climate Neutral and Smart City Conference 2023, an event hosted by the European Commission and the mission manager, NetZeroCities. 1 year ago, most of you started a journey, an unprecedented journey. You're the first 100 plus 12 cities that aim to be climate neutral and smart by 2030. And following your example, actually all European cities shall follow you on that journey to become climate neutral by 2050. So you are the pioneers. And being a pioneer can be hard. No one has done it before. There aren't any clear roadmaps, no clear plans telling you what to do, and that can be scary. So last year you met for the first time, and I assume a lot will have happened in between. You will have ideated activities and projects. You've probably discussed a lot and planned a lot and set first steps, and some of you have already handed in their first climate city contracts. And still there's probably a lot more to do. And it's 7 more years. And that can seem quite challenging, I suppose. So we're also here to take a break and just look at where you are and what you need to improve, how you can support each other, what you can learn from each other. And we're also here to acknowledge that it's not easy to be a pioneer, but also that all of you have actually taken the decision to be one. So there's one thing you have in common. And for the next 2 days, we're actually going to concentrate not so much at you as individuals, but also at you as a group of pioneers, so that you can actually give each other that energy that you need in order to take your next steps, not just individually, but together. And with this, I welcome you to this conference. My name is Katrina. It is my great pleasure to be your Master of Ceremony for the next 2 days. And I would suggest that we just start this next 2 days with arriving here today. I assume you're all coming from all sorts of different contexts. You might have just arrived today or yesterday, and you're just arriving in Brussels. It was so hot yesterday, it's a bit cooler today, but you didn't come in here and it's hot again. It's like all these different impressions, all these different peoples. Did you have the coffee that you wanted? Was it as good as you wanted? So many things, right? Have you finished all the emails? Are you still writing the emails? Have you made the call that you wanted to make? So maybe let's just take a moment to actually give our nervous system time to calm down, which helps us to increase our attention and be able to also remember more of what's going to happen here today. Well, wonderful. With this, I think it's a good starting point for our event. In case you want to share anything about this event with the outside world, please use the hashtag #MissionInProgress. And with no further ado, let's get started with this mission in progress. And with this, it is my great pleasure to welcome on stage, to welcome you to the conference, the Secretary General of Eurocities, André Sobczak.
Thank you, Katharina. Good morning, everybody. Welcome here. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to this very important meeting. Mission in Progress is really a good title for this event because we are on a learning trip, as it was mentioned by Katharina. 1 year ago, we started this very important mission of working all together to make sure that we will have 100 plus 12 cities that will be smart and climate neutral by 2030. You have already done a lot in your different cities. You got a lot of support. And this event is really about, of course, exchanging on where you are, seeing also how we can improve a certain number of things, but also, I think, to create a community. Katharina has invited to show where you all come from and who you are representing, but I think that it's also important to say that we are all part of this common community and we all have to work together to actually achieve this very ambitious goal to make these 112 cities climate neutral by 2030. We will not be able to achieve it if everyone works in a silo alone. We have to use these 2 days to learn from each other, to exchange openly about the different challenges, about the different experiences. We know that we have been asking you a lot, sometimes also to do some work that you already had done before, because a lot of the cities that are in the mission have actually already started, of course, before, and they were motivated to go a little bit further. But in the beginning, of course, also in order to align and to test common methodologies, sometimes you had to redo the work, sometimes you had to convince maybe again the different stakeholders in your different cities. You have sometimes had to adapt to new tools that were invented and so on. So we know that it was a lot of hard work. And sometimes also you may question whether it is really worth it to embark on this journey, because maybe sometimes you are still lacking some additional support that you were expecting from the mission. But as it was also said by Katharina, we have still 7 more years to achieve this ambitious target. And I think that these 2 days here are really crucial in order to use it to really have an open discussion among us, to openly say what are the things that are working well in our new community, but also the things that need to be improved. And I think what is really important as well is that we should try to really find the solutions together. I think it's not about saying that cities would say the NetZeroCities Consortium should do this, or the Commission should do this, or that the NetZeroCities Consortium should say, but the European Commission should maybe give more funding, or maybe it should, or this, or that cities should do certain things. It's really something that we have to work out together. I think that nobody could pretend that he or she has the perfect solutions to achieve these ambitious targets. But I'm very confident that all together, and also because we have a very interesting program that has been elaborated by the different teams, that we will have different kinds of formats actually to find the solutions to work even better together in the next months and years to reach this target. I think it's really something that is important because there are huge expectations, not only in our community, but also beyond. At Eurocities, we just did our Eurocities Pulse. We asked the mayors of our networks what are the priorities, and climate action clearly became the first priority for many of the different mayors. So it shows also that cities that are not in the mission also expect us as being the pioneers and being also able to share them with others. So we have a responsibility to succeed not only for us, but also for others. And also I think we have a responsibility that goes beyond climate neutrality and smart cities, because the way how we work together here between the Commission, between the experts and between the cities, it's also that can be useful for other areas. There are many, many challenges that we are facing in Europe and also beyond. We just had our Brussels Urban Summit where we were also talking about other challenges such as migration and inequalities. And here I'm also quite sure that what we do together in the mission can also, of course, inspire us for these other elements. So great expectations, but please be open. Please try to say what we all together need to improve. And then I'm sure that we can actually achieve this ambitious target and have at least 112 cities that will be smart and climate neutral by 2030. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, André, for that honest starting point in setting the tone for the next 2 days, and the next one setting the scene for those next 2 days. Please welcome on stage with me the Program Director of NetZeroCities EIT Climate-KIC, Thomas Osdoba.
Good morning, everybody. Great to see you all. I'm getting old, so I'm going old school with a good old paper and pen. First off, welcome everyone. Thanks, André, for opening this session up. Thank you also to Eurocities for leading in the planning of this conference, Tara and the team, and with support from LGI and ICLI and others in the NetZeroCities family to put this all together to make this event happen. We're all delighted that we could do this and get together with you all. And it's extremely important, and we're very appreciative of the effort that everyone makes to come together. We've been at this now for a while, a little over a year with you all. And as NetZeroCities, we've been at this for longer than that. It's really hard to do some of this work if we're not in the same room together. So it's really great that we're able to come together and to use the next 2 days to learn from and with each other about this. And we want to get to that as quickly as we can. This is really 2 days for you, not 2 days for NetZeroCities or anyone else. This is your time. So we want to get into the time that we've created, the space we've created for you as quickly as we can. Before we do that, a few just pieces of updating information, a few remarks from me and a few others who've been part of the work over the last year with you all, to share some of how the work as the mission platform is growing, how it's going to adapt and evolve as we continue this process and this journey together. And hopefully we'll have some time. We're going to try to keep this fairly brief. We'll have some time to get a few burning questions out into the open before we break for coffee and then into the exchange sessions this morning and then the rest of the day. And so we're very much looking forward to that time. I think it's worth noting that also today here in Brussels, the city's mission board will be meeting this afternoon, continuing to discuss together ways in which the Commission can support this effort. You may hear more about that tomorrow. I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, but I think it's worth noting that there's a lot happening these 2 days together. So we're very appreciative of that, and I know that there are some from initiatives that are part of the mission, including capacities here, joining us, and that's also critical for the work that we're doing together. Let me just take a couple of minutes to talk about some thoughts over the last year. You know, we got together in the middle of June last year. That was really the first chance for all the cities to come together, and all 112 did come together in Brussels. And we had a good session. It was very brief, but it was also kicking things off. One of the things that was clear at the time, there was a real buzz and a sense of anticipation and expectation about the work and the interest in how this can help us move forward. I think that reflected very well the 377 cities that submitted an expression of interest to participate. I think to Andre's point, cities have been leading on climate for as long as I've been working in climate, which is sadly a long time. And they will continue to lead on these issues. And I think that 377 cities indicating a desire to do this and to try to do this extraordinarily challenging mission is a testament to that. And there's a real hope that the mission would help to accelerate actions. And I think at the time, and it's worth opening today and tomorrow with this sense that the mission is a critical focus of the mission is on learning. and on learning together about how we're going to tackle this very challenging target and this goal. That relates to cities, NetZeroCities, national governments, the European Commission, all learning together what it's going to take. No single actor is going to be able to do this by themselves. The other thing I wanted to briefly talk about, and this is a bit more from the perspective of the mission platform, is you know, it's been a full year, and I want to talk about that a little bit. But I want to do so in a way that invites us all to recognize that for this to work, we need an open and honest partnership. It's very difficult to learn if we're saying politically polite things to each other and not being honest about what it is going to take to do this. And so that's an invitation for us all to do that. Now, I've been in a lot of meetings, both in person and in the old dreaded Teams platform, and there's been lots of examples where we've been very open and very direct about the challenges and about the needs that we have, and that needs to continue, and we need to make today and tomorrow invaluable in being honest and open about what do we need, what is it going to take to make this process work. And as part of that, I think I wanted to start today by both acknowledging the last year and signaling how we go forward from that process. And I use process because we've all had a lot of process over the last 12 months. And a lot of that process, whether it's Climate City Contracts, the Pilot Cities program, the early work with the city advisors, was designed to reflect the fact that we had 112 cities to help begin this process. It would be impossible to have 112 different processes from the beginning. So we had to create some standard approaches to get us going, and that's what we've been doing. And I think we all know some of it's really helpful, some of it's been a challenge. But like everything in this mission, it's going to be a challenge to achieve this mission. It is hard because it will be hard to achieve. But things are going to start to open up. This process was to begin. Now we're into this process. Now it's much more about tailoring those processes to your specific needs. We've built up our capacity. You're going to hear more about how that's growing and expanding to help you in that regard. But now this becomes hopefully a bit of a pivot, and it's not going to be that single moment in time thing, but a process of pivoting to these tools, these processes, working within your timelines, whether it's as an individual city or a group of cities working in a particular country, to drive this forward. And I bring this up this morning because that's not simple. I've worked for many cities in my career, and I've built programs for many cities, and I know it is difficult to bring a new process into an existing city government and its processes. And the reason I emphasize that is because part of our job is to help with that. We don't think that's just your job to do. We're here to show up and make a difference in those conversations you have, because otherwise it's asking too much. And we need to be honest about that. You need to be honest with us when we're asking too much. And we need to do something to overcome that too much. Because that's going to happen a lot, as was noted. We have 7 more years to go. And that's just for the formal 2030 target. We all know it's going to take longer than that, and we're going to have to keep working after 2030. Some may get to net zero by 2030, but the work will continue, because it has to. And we're here to be there for the long haul. This isn't a 2-year project. This is not a 3-year project. This is for as long as it takes, whatever it takes. And that's the mentality that we want to bring into this process. And I want to just take a minute to observe some of the things we've seen and heard particularly over the last 6 months, where as you've engaged with these processes, we're starting to hear from you things that are going to make a difference. We know policy challenges exist. We've known that for a long time. There are who knows how many reports sprinkled across Europe, whether in Brussels or national governments or even cities themselves, talking about the policy barriers climate action. Part of our job is to help create the spaces to tackle those challenges as directly as we can. And I know it's a lot different for somebody who's working inside city government or your mayor, city council. If you've got a partner helping to have a conversation about those policy challenges, and a partner who's motivated to bring national and European conversations together to say, what's it gonna take to unlock this action? How do we do that together? We've created this idea of policy labs as a way to pull that all forward, and we know those are gonna be important. We know those are gonna start needing to take shape and begin working in earnest yet this year in the fall. And I want to invite you to start thinking about that and how that's going to help you through this process. Some of those labs may be very specific to you. Some of them may be within your own country with several cities working together. Some are really European issues. All of those are going to be important. It's not going to be one that's going to make the difference here. The other thing that I think is probably the single most encouraging thing I've seen in 12 months is the degree to which cities are working together with their national governments. Now, this is never smooth, it's never easy. I'm never going to tell you how to work with your national government, just like you wouldn't have known how I worked with senior governments when I was working for cities. But we're seeing real progress in, first, the intention to work together, which is critical. Now, that may not lead to immediate action, but if you don't have the intent to work together towards this outcome, when it comes time to get specific, you're never going to get there. So that's been very encouraging. And I want to just cite an example here, both as a reinforcement of what I'm saying, but also an acknowledgement that that's not that simple. So in Spain, 22 cities have been working together for more than 3 years now. They formally committed to work together towards this objective. And it was through that commitment to working together that they were able to secure a commitment from the national government to support the cities in this process, and not just the 7 mission cities, but all 22 cities. That's significant. They even put funding into the creation of a national platform to help those cities. But that's not just it. 3 years of working together, and I will draw upon what I heard from one of those cities, is that over those 3 years, they've learned a lot from each other. They've built capacity and alignment within their institutions, and that they are now ready for the deep, difficult work that it would take to achieve a mission. And I think that's worth reflecting on. It took them more than 2 years to build to that place where they're like, now we're ready to actually try to do this work. And of course, we've all been paying attention in the last month. Things in Spain are a little different than they were when those conversations were simple and really encouraging. It's going to be a little more complicated than perhaps we thought. But it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of another phase of this process. So I think that's one of the other things to bring into the conversation here, is that we know this is going to take time. We know it's not going to be smooth and simple. We know there are going to be times in which we'll have setbacks. Could be political, could be other things, could be the economy. We all know that things can affect us in this process. But if we stay committed to continuing to work and overcome these challenges, and for you all, I would say, ask us, not for a solution, but ask us to help you with the challenge. Because sometimes it won't be clear what the solution is till we work on it for a while. But ask us to help you. We as much as we'll try, and you're going to hear about this from the city advisors and some of the support that we're going to be bringing, we won't be able to read your minds. We won't be able to tell what's happening inside the internal meetings you're having or the meetings with key stakeholders. Let us know what the challenges are so we can try to help you with those. I would also note the last comment here before we progress into the next step. I would also note that our ability to help you is growing, and it's going to grow quite dramatically in the next few months. Many of you are aware, because this has come up in the course of conversations, NetZeroCities was established, and our first scope of work and the resources for that initial phase of work was established in advance of the mission implementation plan. And that was oriented towards helping 30 cities. So when 112 cities joined this process at the beginning, that was quite an adjustment for us to figure out how to make the most out of the resources we had and adjust our processes to match. However, the Commission's commitment to this support has been followed up with incremental funding because they knew we would need to be able to scale up the level of support that we're offering you. More funding for pilots, more support for city advisors, and technical support for the things that you're going to need. That's now starting to happen. I will say it's a little late. We had planned on this being in place by now, maybe a couple of months ago. But here we are. I just know about a decade ago, I was working on, across the United States, working with social housing owners trying to make their assets more sustainable, and we developed, and it was all very complicated in every place you went, because social housing is difficult, unless you're Vienna, apparently. One of my colleagues actually had t-shirts made up to sort of capture what it felt like to do this work, and it was slower, harder, more expensive. And I don't say that to cast a sort of critical tone, but to just acknowledge this is going to be hard, it's going to take time, and we will get there. And we've tried to orient ourselves this first year with you to building relationships, building trust, and this rapport so that we can work together to tackle the challenges we have. So let me stop there. I know Katarina wants to come up and engage you a little bit, and then we're going to hear from a few NetZeroCities colleagues.
So as you just touched upon on some of the things that might have also been a bit difficult in the last year, what we wanted to do before we actually jump into all the things that we're planning to do is just a moment of reflection of how this past year has been to you. So the way how we're going to do this is you're actually going to be talking to one other person. And the question is really, how has this past year been to you? What were the things that were really challenging and difficult, but also, Thomas also mentioned, what were the things that were kind of encouraging, where you really felt like, oh wow, you know, this is giving me energy. And maybe instead of kind of elaborating too much on details of the story, just kind of concentrate on how it makes you feel now, like what's most alive for you right now there. So the way it will work is that both of you will have about 2 minutes to just talk. That means when one person talks, really do take the entire time. So even if after a minute you feel like, yeah, you know, I'm done talking, you can talk now, you know, maybe just take a break, take a breath, and then see if something else pops up that you would like to share. The person who listens, do not ask any questions, do not make any comments, do not add from your side, but really give your full attention to the person who's speaking, okay? And with this, I would say, let's go into the conversations and let's get back on stage, Thomas Osdoba.
Thanks, Katarina. Thanks, everyone, for that process. So I'm going to introduce briefly the panelists from NetZeroCities. We're going to take a little bit of time to share a few thoughts on a few topics. But I did want to also use that as a way to create a little space for some questions for you all. I know we haven't even got to the questions, and it's really hot up here, so I want to just implore you all to get comfortable. If you need to lose your jacket or a sweater, by all means do so. We're not going to be able to make it through the 2 days if we aren't comfortable. And I followed Andre's lead and ditched my jacket. So let me just introduce the panelists very quickly. I'm going to start on the far end, just introduce them all. Anthony Zakharevsky, who's with Democratic Society. He's based here in Brussels. Jane McLaughlin, who's with Eurocities, based in Barcelona. Francesca Rizzo, who's with Politecnico di Milano, and she's based in Milan. And Eugenie Catron, who's based in Montpellier, with Dark Matter Labs. There are a lot of people, and I'm very old, so bear with me as I sometimes have to pause and think things through. So we're going to have a few thoughts about how we're working with you and how that's going to be evolving in the coming months. So this isn't, we really want to avoid you sitting here listening to us for 2 days, but this is just to give you a sense of how things are going and how things are evolving based on the remarks earlier about we're scaling up our support, we're adapting and we're responding based on the needs that we're perceiving and recognizing the processes are going to start to become much more specific to your individual situation and context. So with that, I'm going to start with Jane. Jane's one of the city advisors. There are currently 13 city advisors working with you all, and you all know who they are. But Jane, the city advisor role has evolved since we started in 2021. How will it continue to evolve following the SNAP and the Horizon workshops parts of the process, as well as the initial Climate City contract work and Pilot City program work? Now, noting that that's ongoing for many cities, of course. But go ahead and share some thoughts about that.
Thanks very much, Thomas, and it's a pleasure to see you all this morning. Yes, I just wanted to say very briefly that for myself and my colleagues who are city advisors, it's truly an honor and privilege to work with all of the 112 mission cities in this program. And we've been working with you all for the last sort of 6 or 7 months now on many different sort of starting to engage with you, and particularly through, many of you are familiar with our SNAP process, which is a process we've gone through to listen to you. And this has been a key part of our work, is really the process we have undertaken to really listen and absorb what's happening in all the cities and start to, as much as we can, try to understand where your real priorities and needs are. And that was very much what our initial process of SNAP has been all about. And I think, one of the things we've been doing is, and we're going to talk a bit more about it in the peer-to-peer session that's coming up a little bit later on this morning, so we'll go into much more detail then. But really, this process of listening and getting to know you all and understanding, the challenges that you face and the work that you're already leading on, but in particular, looking at your challenges and the things that you want to address. And we've seen, of course, many things have arisen from back in 2021 when you all submitted your expression of interest. The world is a very different place. And we have seen so much really inspiring work from the cities in terms of the, in the face of things like the war in Ukraine and the energy crisis. We've seen actually an acceleration of effort and ambition, and that has been incredibly inspiring to see from all of you. So I think in terms of what's happening in your question, Thomas, we've been working through this methodology that we have. That will continue, our journey with that will continue with you as we build up the support and resources that we can provide to you. But really the key has been to listen and understand where your needs are, and then work with our colleagues across the consortium of NetZeroCities to shape and prioritize the sorts of support that you might need, the sorts of ways that you want to work. And this is something we're going to talk about more later, but particularly working on how can we prioritize our effort to support you in this journey. So we're going to continue with those sorts of methodologies. They're very much about opening conversations, and we hope that you find that useful. We certainly find it incredibly invaluable to understand what it is that we can do here to support you in your journey to climate neutrality.
Thanks, Jane. Next, Anthony. I was going to talk about something that will be that has happened a little bit in very informal ways, but will now become much more visible and formal for all of the cities, and that's the city support groups. So Anthony, what are the city support groups, and how will they work with the city advisors to deliver on the specific needs of each city? And how can we make sure we are responsive to changing circumstances?
Thanks, Tom. So one of the things I love about NetZeroCities as a project is learning about all of the cities in the partnership. I used to work at Brighton and Hove in England. I've worked in local government for a while, And so it's always fascinating to find out what's the same, what's different, and just to learn the situations, the conditions, the politics of the places that we're working with. And one of the things that came through really clearly when we were listening to the outcome of the SNAP process, when we were looking at the expressions of interest, is there are a few big areas where almost all of the cities are looking for support. Things like citizen participation, stakeholder engagement and governance, things like finance and investment planning, and social innovation and social change. So the city support groups are designed to support you and to support city advisors with much quicker access to the expertise that exists in the consortium around those issues. So your city advisor will have a city support group around him or her, and that city support group will comprise experts on democratic participation and governance from my organisation, on finance and investment, and on social innovation. And those networks are there to give your city advisor much quicker access to support, but also to ensure that there's someone in the consortium who's a specialist on those three areas, who's able to understand your city and get to know you a bit better. So the city support groups are there to create that immediate access to expertise. But they're not just there for that. They're also there to join up the conversations that are happening around different sorts of questions around participation or questions around investment, and to get access to all of the rest of the expertise that's in the consortium. Because it's a huge consortium. There's a lot of experts, there's a lot of knowledge in our group. And we want to make sure that it's available to you as quickly as possible. It's available to you in ways that reflect your needs at the moment that you need it, but also that we join up that learning. So this isn't just 112 different conversations with 112 different situations. It really does feel like a network of learning, a network of action. And so the city support groups are designed to do that. But the first thing to say is, this is our first draft, right? We think this is going to work. We think it's going to be a positive benefit for the way in which you, the city advisors and the team for NetZeroCities as a whole interact. But we want to be responsive to what you're saying. You know, this is definitely something where we are looking to learn, we're looking to develop the model as we go through. So we'll be coming to you to ask, how's it working? How does it feel? Is this right? And as the process develops over the next 7+ years, as we've been hearing, we want to make sure that we're building the learning not just about all of the issues around NetZeroCities, around mobility, around all the technical support services, but also building lessons about how we can work together as a network and how we can work together as a community to make a change, to make a massive change that involves every aspect of democracy, of society, and of the economy. So that's the purpose of city support groups. Your city advisor will be part of one, and you will therefore get to see a bit more of us in the expert team. But the other thing to say, and maybe the last thing to say, is that this isn't meant to be just 3 topics in addition to what city advisors do. It's meant to open up connections into the whole consortium and beyond. Because the one thing that we know for sure is that this is more than a project. You know, this isn't just something that, you know, we'll get to a certain target number, or we'll get to the end of a Gantt chart, and at the end it's done. It's an ongoing social transformation, and it's a mission. And in the context of a mission, it needs broad connections, and it needs lots of learning and lots of outbound communications as well, to get your whole city communities involved. And that's one of the things that we hope to achieve through the learning and through the network building that city support groups are going to be able to do. I look forward to working with you on developing them.
Thanks, Anthony. So last summer, I mentioned the Spanish National Platform that was created in response to the drive of the cities to work together. Last summer, they also decided to have a bit of a summer school for the city staff to really help them come together, learn, and engage with some of what we were just starting with at the time. For some of you who are in this room, a few weeks ago, we had a summer school in NetZeroCities, a mission summer school in Milan, actually, Lake Como, that was organized by some of our colleagues here. How many here were at the summer school? So we have a few, not a huge number. Francesca, it's one example of the ways NetZeroCities is trying to support cities throughout the mission. How does it work, and what did we learn from the first edition? Besides, I got a lovely apron. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. It was a very inspiring experience, I hope, for the cities, for sure for us, the people from NetZeroCities that were there. The summer school was designed for going on for 2 days and a half, during which 20 cities in Milano, actually, they were together, working together, exchanging between them, and building on what they are already doing in their cities. Basically, we were trying to work on the idea to support the cities that want to offer the window 2, as we used to call it, for applying with the CCC, with the idea that the CCC is an instrument. And what is important in order to implement it during the next years is to work on kind of midterm outcomes we need to work on. Like, just to give you an idea, we were working together with the cities about how to build and grow up a transition team, or how to set a learning and monitoring process, which is fundamental in order to deal with the next year's implementation. And we also had the idea of evolving this summer school. It will not be static. It will be replicated in Santander already in July, then 19, 20, and 21. And it will change the content of this specific way of working with the cities, will evolve as the cities will evolve during the journey, with the idea of co-designing with the cities the agenda and the content that we can deliver. And I hope with keeping this spirit of being really in a community and working together.
Thanks so much. And hopefully we'll have several of you signing up for that if you're not already signed up to spend a little time in the north of Spain. Eugenie, the Climate City Contract is a tool envisioned to help cities build alignment and a mandate for mission-like action, and to help advance multi-level governance and to mobilize resources in support of this work. How would you say it's going? What are your observations and reflections? And equally important, how are we adapting as we go based on what we're seeing so far?
So we're seeing very interesting dynamics across Europe. We're seeing cities making the Climate City Contract their own, and so making the systemic approach their own. You mentioned Spanish cities a little bit earlier, and I think, for example, they're an interesting example of what's going on because they've been working on their economic model, really rethinking even their data emissions, seeing different results from their usual calculation, and by doing this, actually creating a very strong argument for multi-stakeholder collaboration. We're seeing many other cities really investing in this multi-actor collaboration dynamic. In Porto, we're seeing all the stakeholders of the city, from stadium and football club, all the way to private sector and park management in the same room, which is incredible. In Lyon, we're seeing the city's team engaging in a month-long process with actors, small and big, actually co-creating a governance structure together, which is extremely exciting for us to see. We're seeing also big efforts in terms of integration. For example, Valencia doing an amazing job at thinking their internal planning strategies and their Climate City Contract as two sides of the same coin. And they're really, for example, embarking on this journey with a strong identity, thinking, what does it mean to create a climate-neutral Mediterranean city? This is extremely interesting. Other efforts of integration are happening more in the north of Europe. We can see, for example, Amsterdam engaging in a relatively ambitious way into integrating their circular economy strategy with their Climate City Contract and climate action. So all of this really is showing a very positive pathway in front of us. We're excited to see more cities doing the same. But I think another thing that has been achieved in the last year, in the year that we've just been through, is really also this idea of connection. And really starting to have connections between cities and our team, and actually gradually starting to work together as a collaborative platform, really. building the necessary trust, relationship to be doing things together and advancing on the way to 2030.
Great, thanks very much. I know one of our partners, they're just traveling in, somebody had a delayed flight, and I see in the back we've got a few people arriving, but I'm not going to put them on the spot. But we did also want to briefly talk about, we all know how important resources are, and those resource needs are multiple and quite substantial, and those are not going to go away. And we're working as much as we can on all fronts to advance that work. And that comes in the form of both tools to help with that process, but also thanks to the Commission and the Mission Board's advice, listening to the needs of cities, resources that are coming, they're not here yet, but they're coming to directly provide capacity support to the cities involved in the mission for this finance work. We know that that's critical. So that's coming as well. I want to make sure, because everybody's always asking about that, and that's a conversation into its own. But let me just pause there. We've got about 10 minutes before we break, and again, I want to emphasize this is today and tomorrow for you to talk and ask us questions. So let's start by asking questions if we have a few before we have the break. And I'm not going to try to answer everything, but I want to just kind of bring these things out into the open so we all can carry those through our conversations the course of the day. And of course, we'll try to answer if there's a simple answer. Any questions? I think we have some roving microphones as well. The Monday morning ploy has worked. Everybody's not quite there yet. There's a question right there, Karen.
Yes. Hello, I am Agne.
Could you introduce? Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
Could you introduce yourself?
I am Agne from Tauragė, from Lithuania, and I have a question regarding communication with the national government. In regards to, will there be communication from NetZeroCities with the national governments of the countries? Because we try to collaborate as much as we can, but I think there needs to be a push from perhaps your side.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's a great question, and the short answer is there should be plenty of conversation and multiple forms of conversation. I think the question is, let's make sure we work together to make it strategic, right? Patrick Child, who's the mission manager, he'll be here tomorrow, I think most of the day, if not all day, and staff from the mission secretariat are here. They are always ready to talk to national government representatives. At the same time, sometimes they're just staff people to talk to at the national level, and we're all happy to engage in those conversations as well. And I think the key is to develop a strategic approach. What are we trying to get out of that conversation? Let's make sure we design a process of communicating that's going to deliver that. We know we can offer some leverage. The Secretariat knows that they can offer some leverage and potentially bring others to the table as well. So that needs to be part of the process. In the back, thanks.
Good morning. I'm from Lyon, so thank you, Eugénie, for the nice word. I had a question about the label. You know, a year ago, you mentioned that once cities had finalized the Climate City contract and once it would be approved by the European Commission, there would be a label. So I was wondering whether there was any update on that. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for the question and welcome. And good to see you again. So on the question of the label, I'm going to answer very briefly two things. There'll be a lot more on this going forward, I'm sure, and this will come up tomorrow, I'm almost positive, in the course of the discussions with mayors and other European Commission representatives. So we have, from the first Climate City contract submission window, we have 10 cities with completed contracts, so commitments, action plans, investment plans, that are now in the process of being reviewed for the purpose of that label determination. The goal is to have that completed by 4 months after the submission deadline, which would be the middle of August. That's the target. We're trying to hit that target with that process. It's been Part of it has been slowed down a little bit by some of the resources that have been delayed, as I noted earlier, but we're working very hard on that, and my summer vacation doesn't start until that's done. So there's good motivation there. So we'll have our first sort of look at how that has worked for the first round of the Climate City Contracts process and cycle. I know there are many cities, potentially as many as 50, working on their Climate City Contracts for submission in the fall for the label. So we know this is a very active time, and we want to make sure that we're keeping a lot of space open on this. I want to just briefly comment on the label. I think over time, the value of the label is going to only increase. I think that we've had some conversations, so there's no reason not to be out in the open about it. There was some expectation that the label would have sort of an almost immediate benefit. That's not, from a resourcing perspective, that's not happening yet. But I will say, even in the last 6 months, there's encouraging signs of movement. That mission cities who are driving work at this scope and this scale, again, the Climate City Contract's a tool and not an end in and of itself, is getting the attention of those who are going to be part of making the label valuable in a variety of ways, whether it's resources, whether it's policy leverage, whatever it is. But I think that its value is going to increase over time, and it's going to increase over time because the work that the cities are doing demands that. And our commitment is to work with you to try to get to that place. I know the Mission Secretariat is actively talking across all the different DGs and the Commission about how the Commission and the EU can help cities that have achieved this label with whatever their needs are. So this is very much the beginning phase of hopefully what will be a series of phases over time. So I know that's a little bit of a to be determined answer, but that's where it's at. And that's what I can tell you now. Any other questions? Yes, right here.
Sorry, excuse me. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Marcin Gronsky from City of Warsaw. I have a follow-up question on a Climate City contract. So we know that some of Climate City contracts are already submitted and now are being evaluated. Are you planning to reflect on those and tell us, what are the top quality components, what could we build on, and etc.? And another question would be about the possibility of peer-to-peer meeting with the cities that has submitted contracts and they were accepted, approved, etc. So we can build on, the best cases that are available.
Thanks very much. It's almost like I planted that question. I assure you I did not. So the short answer is yes to all of those things. As we're reviewing those and as quickly as we're able to, we will both share what's shareable with you directly with all cities. We will also be developing our sense of what's useful and insightful about what the cities have been doing and how they've been doing it. That's useful to share, right? The Spanish government the Spanish cities got the Spanish government to sign commitments, right? And before the election, they really drove the process. There's something to be said about that, even though the politics are changing there, right? So we'll be sharing as much as we can from them as fast as we can. I note that it's the end of June, so we want to do that thoughtfully, so we're not projecting things out into the ether in the summer and no one's really paying attention or able to bring their colleagues or stakeholders together. But that's coming, and you're going to see a lot more of that in the future because we know the learning from the early work is critical. And some of the cities, I'm sure you'll have an opportunity today and tomorrow, some of the cities that drove towards this first submission window can share their thoughts. Some are going to be very positive about the experience and some may a little less impressed. And that's all part of the learning process. We're not going to learn if everybody's delighted with everything we do. So we'll look for more of that. But that kind of information is coming as quickly as we can get it out to you. Let's see if we have time for one more. Or we can get on to the coffee. I think they've turned the air on, so it's a little better in here. All right. Thank you again for coming, spending 2 days with us. We're extremely appreciative of that effort. We're extraordinarily excited for the time in person. We know how important this in-person time is. We can get as much done in 2 days as we could do in 2 weeks if we really use this time well. And that includes this evening. I think we all know how much work you can sometimes get done after a day when you go have a couple refreshments and some food together. So let's look forward to that process. I look forward to talking to you throughout the course of the next 2 days. Thanks.
Wonderful. Please give it up for them. Thank you so much, Thomas, Anthony, Jane, Francesca, and Eugenie. And before we go into the break, maybe let's have one more look at the word cloud that you have filled in with your kind of expectations and wishes for today. I see learning. I think we've spoken quite a lot about learning right now. Clarity, building a network, connections, contacts, inspiration is quite big. And my question to you would also be, turning this back around, what is it where you can contribute to this? And what is it where you can make sure that this is going to happen for you? And maybe the first one is, as we're now going into the break, since you're all longing for connections, just go up to one person that you don't know yet and say, I do not know you yet. Tell me who you are. And with this, I wish you a great break. We're back here at 11:30. You also have project stands when you go out here to the left-hand side, where you can see and learn a bit more about mission projects. And then we go into the first workshop at 11:30, so make sure to be back here on time. Have a great break. Thank you very much. See you later.